Bobby Heenan could make you love him or hate him, but one thing's for sure, he was never boring. But did his sharp wit ever go too far? We're uncovering the man behind the legend and exploring some of his most controversial moments. Whether he was managing some of the biggest names in the business or delivering his signature witty commentary, Bobby Heenan always knew how to captivate an audience. But there was more to the brain than met the eye. Behind the quick wit and the mischievous grin, there was a complex man who faced his fair share of controversies and challenges. Today, we're going beyond the persona and exploring the real Bobby Heenan, the man behind the legend. Let's be real, Heenan's commentary was legendary. He was sharp, funny, and always had a comeback that would leave you in stitches. But sometimes he pushed the envelope a little too far, especially by today's standards. Now, back in the day, certain types of humor were just more common in wrestling. Heenan would sometimes make jokes about a wrestler's race or ethnicity, especially when it came to guys like Mr. Fuji. And he wasn't always the kindest to the women in wrestling either, sometimes saying things that wouldn't be acceptable today. Heenan was also a master of blurring the lines between what was real and what was part of the show. This sometimes made it hard to tell if he was just playing a character or if he actually believed the things he was saying. That's part of what made him so compelling, but it also led to some controversial moments. Heenan's outspoken personality and sharp wit sometimes landed him in hot water with other people in the wrestling business. One of the biggest rumors was about his relationship with his longtime broadcast partner, Gorilla Monsoon. Even though they had amazing chemistry on screen, it's been said that they didn't always get along in real life. Maybe it was just because they were such different people, or maybe they had different ideas about how things should be done. Whatever the reason, it seems like there was some tension there. Heenan also reportedly had some issues with WCW commentator Tony Schiavone. Heenan was a bit of an old-school wrestling guy, and he sometimes seemed frustrated with Schiavone's approach to commentary. He might have thought Schiavone wasn't taking wrestling seriously enough, or maybe he just didn't like his style. Either way, they didn't always see eye to eye. And then there was the Ultimate Warrior. Heenan really didn't like that guy. It all started when Warrior accidentally hurt Heenan during a match. Heenan never really forgave him for that, and often criticized Warrior's wrestling ability and his personality. Even years later, Heenan still had some harsh words for Warrior. Sadly, Heenan's later years were filled with health problems. In 2002, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. He had to go through a lot of surgeries and treatments, and it really took a toll on him. It got to the point where he could barely speak, which was especially tough for a guy who made his living with his voice. He had to step away from commentary and public appearances, which must have been really hard for him. On top of that, he had a few bad falls that caused serious injuries like a broken hip and a broken neck. This made it difficult for him to get around and just enjoy life in general. All of these health problems, along with not being able to do what he loved anymore, really affected Heenan mentally. It's been said that he struggled with depression in his final years. Even with the controversies and the tough times, Bobby Heenan left behind an incredible legacy in professional wrestling. He was a true innovator, a master of his craft, and someone who brought joy to millions of fans around the world. He was more than just a funny guy with a nickname. He was a complex person who had a huge impact on the wrestling business. We remember him for his incredible wit, his ability to make us believe in the characters he portrayed, and his talent for making us laugh and cheer, even when he was supposed to be the bad guy. Now, for the real ones who truly loved him, here I've made a mini documentary on Bobby. I'm sure you'll love it. Bobby Heenan was born a long time ago in 1944 in Chicago. His childhood wasn't easy. His dad worked on the railroad, and his mom managed a hotel, but they didn't have a lot of money. Bobby had to grow up quickly and even quit school in the 8th grade to help his family. Can you imagine being so young and having to work instead of going to school? But Bobby had a big dream. He wanted to be a wrestler. He loved wrestling as a kid and was determined to be a part of it somehow. He started by doing all sorts of odd jobs. He carried bags for wrestlers, sold drinks at wrestling shows, and did anything he could to get his foot in the door. Bobby was a hard worker and never gave up on his dream. He was tough and always found a way to get what he wanted. By 1960s, Bobby Heenan was a wrestling manager, but not just any manager. He was a master of getting under people's skin. He was so good at making fans angry that he became known as Bobby the Brain Heenan. Now, what exactly does a wrestling manager do? Well, they're kind of like a hype man for the wrestler. But Bobby was way more than that. His job was to make the crowd absolutely hate him and the wrestlers he was managing. He did this by talking trash, interfering in matches, and always finding ways to cheat to help his wrestlers win. Basically, he was the ultimate bad guy. One of the things Heenan is most famous for is the Heenan family. This wasn't a real family, but a group of wrestlers he managed. And this wasn't just any group. We're talking about some of the biggest names in wrestling history, like Nick Bockwinkel, King Kong Bundy, and even Andre the Giant. Heenan led these guys to huge matches, even against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. But here's the thing about Bobby Heenan. He was a genius at making his wrestlers look super strong, but he also made himself the main target. Fans hated him even more than the wrestlers he managed. Why? Because he was the one always running his mouth, cheating, and causing trouble. He was like the mastermind behind everything, and fans loved to see him get what was coming to him. One of the best examples of how good Heenan was is his feud with Hulk Hogan. Hogan was the biggest hero in wrestling, and Heenan was the perfect bad guy to go against him. Heenan even convinced Andre the Giant to turn against Hogan at WrestleMania 3, which was a huge deal. But even when his wrestlers lost, Heenan somehow still managed to come out looking smart and sneaky. He was just that good. And of course, we can't forget his nickname, Weasel. Fans loved to chant Weasel at him, and he totally played along. He even got chased around the ring in a weasel suit a few times. Bobby Heenan joined the WWF in 1984, and originally the plan was for him to manage Jesse Ventura. But Jesse had to step away from wrestling because of health problems, so instead, Bobby teamed up with Big John Studd. The two of them became a big part of a feud with Andre the Giant. At the very first WrestleMania, Studd challenged Andre to a body slam match with $15,000 on the line. If Andre lost, he'd have to retire. But Andre won, of course, and then started tossing the cash into the crowd. Bobby, being the sneaky guy he was, grabbed the bag of money and ran off with it. Over time, Bobby built a reputation as one of the best managers in wrestling. He put together what he called the Heenan family, which included a ton of big names like King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, and more. He always seemed to be going after Hulk Hogan, managing one wrestler after another to try to take Hogan's championship. At WrestleMania 2, he managed King Kong Bundy in a steel cage match against Hogan, and a year later he brought Andre the Giant into the spotlight to challenge Hogan at WrestleMania 3. That match became one of the most iconic in wrestling history. Andre didn't win that night, but he later beat Hogan for the title in 1988, though it was a controversial win with plenty of shady stuff happening behind the scenes thanks to Bobby and Ted DiBiase. For a while, people joked that Bobby couldn't manage a champion, but that all changed at WrestleMania 5. Ravishing Rick Rude, one of Bobby's guys, managed to defeat the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship. Bobby even helped by holding Warrior's leg down during the pin. Not long after, Bobby led the Brainbusters to win the WWF Tag Team Championship, and later, Andre and Haku, as the Colossal Connection, also won the tag titles. But when they lost the belts at WrestleMania 6, Bobby blamed Andre for the loss and even slapped him. That didn't go over well with Andre, who ended their partnership on the spot. While Bobby was mostly known as a manager, he did step into the ring occasionally. His matches were rare and usually played for laughs. In one of his early WWF matches, he actually won, pinning Salvatore Bellomo. At WrestleMania 4, he teamed up with the Islanders to beat the British Bulldogs and Coco Beware. But not all of his matches went his way, like at WrestleMania 5, when the Red Rooster beat him in just 30 seconds. Bobby also had these hilarious weasel suit matches against the Ultimate Warrior, where Warrior would stuff him into a ridiculous weasel costume as part of the match. Bobby's last match came in 1991 when he beat Mr. Fuji at a live show. In 1991, Bobby decided to step back from managing full-time and focused on being a commentator. But he still occasionally got involved in storylines, like when Ric Flair joined the WWF. Bobby hyped Flair as the real world's heavyweight champion and stuck by him during his WWF run. He also introduced Lex Luger in 1993 as a way to go after Mr. Perfect, who had become one of Bobby's rivals by then. Now, as a commentator, Bobby became even more popular. He started working with Gorilla Monsoon on shows like Primetime Wrestling and Wrestling Challenge. The two had amazing chemistry. Bobby would root for the villains and crack jokes while Gorilla tried to keep things serious. Bobby loved poking fun at the fans, calling them humanoids, and he'd make fun of lesser-known wrestlers by calling them ham and eggers. Gorilla would often respond with, "Will you stop?" or "Give me a break." Fans loved their banter, and Bobby's quick wit made him one of the best in the business. By 1993, though, Bobby had had enough of the WWF's grueling schedule. His neck, which had been injured years earlier, was giving him trouble, and the long hours were taking a toll. On his last night with the WWF, Gorilla Monsoon hilariously threw Bobby out of the arena on Monday Night Raw. But behind the scenes, it was an emotional goodbye. Bobby and Gorilla hugged and cried together, showing just how close they were. Bobby originally planned to retire after leaving the WWF, but he ended up joining WCW in 1994. The lighter schedule and health benefits were a big draw, plus it let him stay closer to his family. In WCW, Bobby became a commentator on shows like Saturday Night and Monday Nitro. One of his most memorable moments came at Bash at the Beach in 1996, when Hulk Hogan shocked the world by turning heel and joining Kevin Nash and Scott Hall to form the New World Order, NWO. As Hogan walked to the ring, Bobby blurted out, "Whose side is he on?" A line that fans still remember today. Even with Hogan now playing the bad guy, Bobby kept criticizing him, saying he'd been right about him all along. Despite his success in WCW, Bobby didn't enjoy his time there as much as he had in the WWF. He didn't like the backstage environment, and he clashed with some of his coworkers. By 2000, his role in WCW had been reduced, and he was eventually let go. Not long after, WCW went out of business. Bobby Heenan was one of a kind. Whether he was managing some of the biggest names in wrestling or cracking jokes as a commentator, he always found a way to entertain. He could make you laugh, make you angry, or make you love to hate him, and that's what made him so special. He wasn't just a manager or commentator. He was a storyteller who brought so much life and personality to wrestling. From his clever insults to his iconic banter with Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby created moments that fans still talk about today. Even though he's no longer with us, Bobby Heenan's impact on wrestling is timeless. Fans still go back to watch his hilarious commentary and brilliant work with the Heenan family. He left behind a legacy of laughter, passion, and unforgettable moments that made wrestling more than just a sport. It was entertainment at its best. Thanks for sticking around and reliving Bobby's incredible career with me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a lot. And if you've got a favorite Bobby Heenan moment, let me know in the comments. Was it his hilarious banter with Gorilla, his time managing Andre the Giant, or maybe one of those classic weasel suit matches? I'd love to hear what you think. That's it for now, but stay tuned for more wrestling history, stories, and legends. Until next time, take care and keep enjoying the world of wrestling.